So welcome to the Merchant Payments Ecosystem podcast with Jodie Kelley, Chief Executive Officer of the Electronic Transactions Association. Good afternoon, Jodie. Pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
And as I mentioned, it's a tremendous pleasure to reconnect. And we've known each other for years, particularly participating at many of your institutions' events in Washington, D.C., Toronto, etc. And I'm a tremendous admirer of the work that you and your team do for the fintech and payments industry in North America. In parallel, I also have a deep love for merchant payments ecosystem, being part of their advisory board and also participating at the yearly event in Berlin, with the next one coming up March 18th to the 20th next year. I guess the first question, we're fresh from Money 2020 a couple of weeks ago, where the buzz about AI and RegTech and open banking and real-time payments, embedded finance, and the rest. So I'm curious as to your take on the 5 trends shaping the future of the payments industry.
Yeah. So, that's a great question, and you rattled off several. I have to say, when I think about payments and what makes it interesting and exciting now, taking a step back, and then we can dive into individual trends. But what I really love is the way in which kind of user experience and technology are combining to really drive innovation. When I started this job, when you and I met years ago, I used to talk about how interesting and exciting it was to me that, you take what used to be, if you had to get from one place to another, you go out and you'd hail a cab and hope one came along. And, then you'd, look to see if you had cash in your wallet or if you even remembered your wallet. And that experience got sort of condensed to on your phone, right? You just tap a button, you say where you want to go. And you not only have a car that comes to pick you up and bring you there, but you pay for it, right in app. It is, it's an easy experience. It makes your day easier. It is frictionless. And that is true, that innovation, across the ways in which people pay. Think about the way we pay in stores or we pay online. It's getting faster and with less friction, and always secure. And when that happens, consumers love it, users love it, and they want more, and they push for more, and technology responds and gives more. And so you get this innovation cycle that we're seeing, right, that just takes off. And a lot of the trends within it are all being deployed to do just that, right, to make the payments experience and other similar experiences faster, frictionless, but always secure. We're moving people's money, so security is at the core. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into some of the trends, but when you take a step back and look at the macro, I think that's what we're seeing. And you're seeing it not just for individual consumers like me and you, but, merchants as well, right? Ways in which merchants can use a single piece of software or a single app to better manage their business, to do things like schedule and order, and also to accept payments, right? These solutions that just make life better for all of us.
And I agree that there is no doubt that the consumer is playing a great role in driving innovation, because our last experience becomes our next expectation. And we see it with the Gen Zers and sort of the newer generations having they've been trained by the Ubers and the Apples of the world, and they expect everything to be intuitive and follow your nose. And that, I think, is the challenge for technologies, to provide that continued improvement in user experience and removing friction, making payments transparent, as you were mentioning, easy. And we have the benefit that technology enables that rapid cycle of innovation, with cloud computing and the power of computing, Internet of Things, 5G, and all the things that are happening, combined together, deliver a great environment.
Yeah. You said a couple of things I thought were really interesting. So, one of them, again, pointing to that, technology enabling. an experience that is simpler and frictionless. I actually thought this morning in the car, I've told this story more than once, and I thought this is the day to tell it. So, I think about when I get in my car and when I run low on gas, it pops up. And that happened this morning. And I was running late. So I did not ask it to navigate me to a gas station and just get my fingers crossed that I'll make it home. But it will. My car will navigate me to a gas station when I'm low on gas. My next car will also pay for it. The payments will be embedded in there. I will pull into the gas station, I will fuel, and I will drive away, and it will be paid, making that experience a little more seamless yet, a little more frictionless yet. And that's just one example of all the ways in which I think we're going to see this technology evolve. And I think we're going to see it happening increasingly quickly for exactly the reason you identified. When you look at Gen Z and their expectations and the way that they not only expect, but sort of demand that things be easy and intuitive and frictionless and designed for their use. That generation is going to really propel those innovations forward because they're going to expect it. And technology will meet those expectations.
If you look at the challenge that fintechs, but banks have as well, it's to, I guess, earn the loyalty of consumers, especially now where, unlike in the past where people would, walk into a branch fairly often, now the average consumer does 96% of their transactions over their computer and their phone, and they walk into the branch, say, once every 3 months. So how does the bank in that case or the fintech earn the loyalty of that consumer? And it's by solving a problem, by saving people time, by reducing the stress, by giving you something that adds value to your life, right? That's the only way that they earn that loyalty. So
I think that's absolutely right. And, one of the interesting data points I think about Gen Z is they have very little loyalty, right? They don't have relationships with institutions in the way that, that you and I did. And so, getting that customer, keeping that customer, it's going to require, a laser focus on, am I solving a problem for you? Am I making your experience better? Am I continuing to evolve in ways that your experience improves? And again, always with security underlying it, because, that is so critical. But from a consumer experience, that too is an expectation, right? What they're focused on is it easy? Is it frictionless? Am I getting what I need from the experience?
I guess the next question is a little bit different. I mean, I've been toying with AI for tens of years. I'm a techie at heart, and that's how I started back in the day. And it's come a long way, obviously, in terms of the algorithms, the computing power, and the sheer performance of what AI can do today. And when I look at payments and fintech, there's two areas where AI is a game changer. One is risk and compliance, obviously, catching the bad guys, weeding out, things like detecting linked accounts, detecting patterns that are not visible to the naked eye, and being able to say, hey, all these accounts on the surface appear to be unrelated, but upon a closer look, they share the same PIN or the same IP address, or there is a flow of transactions that makes it so that they're somehow related, like a ring crime or a crime ring.
Right.
So that's the power of AI when it comes to risk and compliance. But then there is the other side, which is sort of on the marketing side, the ability to mass customize, right? To provide consumers, to make consumers feel valued for their patronage and the loyalty, and also automate user interactions, chatbots, support, etc. So AI is more and more taking a big role in terms of automating many of these functions. But from your perspective, how is the payments industry using and not using AI?
Yeah, I love the way you frame that question. And we think about it here at ETA like that, in part because we're engaged with policymakers all day, every day. And policymakers, both at the federal level and in the state level and around the world, obviously, are trying to figure out what the right regulatory framework is for AI. And we all know that technology moves faster than policymakers. And in the AI space, that is certainly true. And so one of the things that we spend time doing is talking to policymakers about the ways in which we already use AI as an industry, and we use it for good. And it's important to understand that this, to your point, you've been using it for decades. This isn't some new technology that sprang up last year, when the New York Times reporter engaged with ChatGPT. This technology, which is evolving, has been deployed for a very long time. And it's been deployed security, to your point, to really try to identify fraudulent patterns, to see where we can't see with our naked eye, things that look suspicious that need to be flagged and investigated. And, in doing so, keeping consumers safe. And, that is, we're doing that already. We will continue to do that as AI improves, and it's improving, just exponentially. We'll be able to leverage that more. But what we're not as an industry doing now, given where AI is in its life cycle, we're not using it for the kinds of ultimate decisioning that policymakers are concerned about. There's a lot of conversation, and it's important conversation, but about, implicit bias that's baked into data, and a lot of concern, therefore, among policymakers that decisions are going to be made that affect consumers in very fundamental ways that are affected by bias and in ways that are negative. And so, explaining what we're not doing today, but how we are instead kind of working with the technology to understand its limitations and how to improve it so that it can be fully deployed in the future is as important as explaining what we are in fact doing with it now. And all of that is so important because, to your point, there is so much possibility here. We talk about, the underlying trends that, that are shaping payments. I don't know if I call AI a trend, but it's certainly going to be an important component of this whole ecosystem going forward, and lots of interesting and use cases that it can be deployed for. But what you want to make sure is that policymakers don't, out of fear, regulate it to the point that you can't, right? That you can't, do those experiments, that you can't figure out how to use it, improve it, and deploy it, because it has such incredible potential, not just for efficiency, not just for compliance, as you say, although that's a critical use case, but not just for security, although that's a critical use case, but for things like, as you said, marketing for small businesses. Just think about what an incredible tool this is, how it's going to allow them to really exponentially grow their business in a way they just don't have the bandwidth to otherwise. So, I said recently that I thought AI was overhyped but underestimated. I think there's just a lot of noise about it right now. But I think a lot of the focus is misplaced. I think there's there are incredible ways we can leverage it. We just need to make sure that that's done responsibly and that the government doesn't inadvertently get in the way through regulation that's well-intentioned, but ends up stymieing innovation.
Totally. The lens through, even though I'm a techie, the lens through which I see or I look at these areas is always their ability to solve a real problem. So we talked about AI, mass customization, stopping the bad guys, solves a real problem. Other trends, if I think of, embedded finance, the ability to put lending into a native user experience, wealth tech, we're about to experience the world's largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. And wealth tech could play a key role in helping consumers as they essentially inherit the wealth of their parents. And I see other opportunities like, cross-border orchestration, where companies helping, the Googles, the Amazons, the Ubers of the world, the Metas of the world, sell into emerging economies, LATAM, Africa, India, APAC. There is a ton of places where people are hungry to participate in the global economy, and those consumers want to participate, want to be able to subscribe, to buy, to take part in that global movement. And so every time there is a problem, I guess the other side of the coin is that there is an opportunity, and technology could be a great enabler to solve those problems, to increase things like financial inclusion, be better at stopping the bad guys, etc.
Yeah, yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, and you see a lot of that right now, tech, right, focusing on concrete problems. Like, what is that's the question that's being asked as it should. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And as you point out, or the challenge that we're embracing, there's so many of them, whether it is, we touched on this earlier, the software companies that are combining lots of different functionality, including payments, to help a small business run more efficiently, or cross-border, which is just a huge, right, like a huge challenge to embrace, and a real need, particularly in a global economy in which we live, where borders are the concept of borders are so different than that they were historically, and obviously lots and lots of people around the world to try to bring into the financial ecosystem, and technology can absolutely address all of that, right? It can address all of that. It requires a lot, including on the regulatory front, right? It requires harmonization of rules. For example, if you're talking cross-border on both sides of the transaction. So a lot of work to be done. Not all of it is solved by technology. Some of it is solved by, good old-fashioned public policy, but just so much opportunity out there.
And Jodie, that's a perfect segue for kind of the next topic. I've always seen regulation or the regulators as having a dual role. On one side, obviously, their mandate is to protect the stability, the solidity, the robustness of our financial networks and system, and also to protect consumers. That's on one side. On the other side is also to foster innovation that results in better and more competitive services for both consumers and businesses, particularly small businesses, i.e. more value, increased functionality, and lower prices. So it's a little bit of a conundrum because sometimes the two are at odds, but I'm curious as to your take on the regulatory challenges and opportunities in fintech.
Yeah, so I think a good regulatory framework, and certainly the frameworks that we're advocating for all over, involve trying to strike that balance. And you're right, there's inevitably a balance. Consumer protection is really critical. Fostering innovation is really critical, right? And finding that right sweet spot, is constantly a work in progress. It's one of the reasons it's really important for industry to be engaged with regulators so that they can understand who we are and what we do, and what the unintended consequences might be of either overregulation or otherwise striking that balance incorrectly. And really just a fundamental understanding of the complexity of this kind of very robust ecosystem that we've built. We are engaged in a number of states right now on an issue, where the states are trying to change the way in which transactions, merchants compensate for transactions that are run by taking out of that equation the sales tax or the excise tax, and sometimes tips. And I really think part of what's going on is there's just not an understanding of how many parties are involved in any given transaction, how the flow actually works, how everything is interconnected and has to work seamlessly and be tested. There's just a sense that this is very simple. And I think that's in part because we've made it simple, right? When you think about, you go to the grocery store and pay, it's not hard, right? You tap your phone or you tap your card and you walk out and you're done. And that's by design, right? We're trying to make it simple. But policymakers don't understand that behind that is a very complex system that involves, among other things, protecting people from fraud. And so it is a tough balance to strike. It's really critical to be engaged all the time with policymakers. And our industry has a great story to tell. We do amazing work. We drive incredible innovation. As you noted earlier, we bring people into the financial ecosystem. We should be out there screaming about this from the rooftops so that people really understand the degree to which we underpin the economy, because we do.
And I think, Jodie, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And beyond the aspect of innovation as a way to deliver more value, better features to consumers, to businesses, and to increase the competitiveness of the market for the benefit of the users in general, there is a second aspect to it, which is, if we're not a hotbed for innovation, where are the next major companies emerge from? Is it going to be New York and San Francisco, or Atlanta and Austin, or is it going to be Beijing and Bangalore and Sao Paulo and Lagos, right? If we are not at the leading end of coming up with new technologies and new applications, some of the economic benefits of the growth will go to other areas that are more friendly, or that create a critical mass and the world is a global village. I mean, there is talent everywhere. I am privileged enough to be able to work with people on 5 different continents, and there is no shortage of talent everywhere. So it's a matter of who has a better environment to foster the creation of these companies and the economic benefit that comes with the creation of well-paid jobs and growth that comes with it. So I think there is an economic issue here as well.
There's an important economic issue here. I agree with that completely. And I do think, this debate has quieted down a little bit, at least here in this country. But if you think back a few years ago, to when there was more conversations happening around central bank digital currencies and whether or not the U.S. should be exploring that more in earnest, one of the primary arguments for exploring that further is a competitiveness argument. That you can disagree with it, and I don't think that the folks who are advancing that had it exactly right. But the fundamental point that there is innovation happening in other countries around the world that you can't ignore, and that if we make it too hard to innovate here, it's not going to stop the innovation. It's just going to drive it somewhere else, I think is absolutely correct. And we've enjoyed the position that we're in now, kind of being the innovative capital of the world, but it's not guaranteed, right? You have to have an environment that encourages that and supports that.
And Jodie, the last point is one that's very, very dear to my heart, as I'm a proud father of 3 daughters. And I'm committed and strongly believe in mentoring and paying forward. I feel that those of us that have been fortunate enough to lead interesting careers have almost a duty to pay it forward and to help the next generation of change makers. I think back to my own career. It doesn't matter how, we may have good marks at school, but there is a first university that accepts us. There is a first job that is given to us when we're an unknown quantity. Someone takes a chance on us as an individual early on in our careers. And that kind of begins the virtuous circle allows us to start snowballing and building upon it. But we all need that first lending hand, that chance to show a company, someone that what we're capable of. And as part of my own personal commitment, I've been doing this on my own, kind of in an unstructured manner, mentoring people. But I'm also part of the Rise Up and Amplify program at Money 2020, mentoring right now, 6 people, mostly women, in places like Nigeria and India, the States, etc., Europe. It's very rewarding. I often say that I learn more than I teach. It's a two-way street, and I get a lot from the mentees in terms of learning. But in general, you actually are the embodiment of women in leadership, breaking barriers and promoting diversity in our industry, in payments, in fintech. So I'm curious as to your perspective as to how do we double down on it. In fact, just one thing I wanted to mention to you, 2 weeks ago when I was at my 2020, Tracy was saying that when she started the program Rise Up in 2018, the percentage of women panelists at my 2020 was 13%. And this year it was 46%. So clearly there is progress and there is change, but I'm really curious as to your perspective and your guidance on the subject.
Well, I appreciate you raising that. Your 3 daughters are very lucky to have a dad that is so forward thinking and focused. I have a son and a daughter myself. My daughter's about to graduate from college, so she'll very soon be looking for that first person to take a chance on her. And we know how important that is. And, I want to say, I entered this industry when I started this job, and it's been phenomenal. The people in it to a person have been positive and supportive. It's a thoughtful group of people. It's an impressive group of people. So there's nothing about it that, at least in my experience, has been challenging from that perspective. It's much more that we still remain in a place where the reality is only 6 out of 107 financial institutions Deloitte surveyed are led by women. And so there just, as a matter of fact, is a lot of work that still needs to be done. When I look at my own board, which is the most phenomenal group of people I've ever had the privilege to work with, I have 9 CEOs on the board, if you include me, and 8 of them are men. And I love every one of them. I wouldn't trade any of them to save my life. But the reality is there's just more men in that boardroom than there are women. And, I'm privileged to lead the group. And I know from experience that having the broadest and most diverse group of voices at the table and having the broadest and most diverse group of thinkers tackling a problem always leads to a better outcome. And so I just think we have to be very intentional about, making sure that we are helping promote that and kind of drive to that outcome. And a big thank you for what you're doing, right? The fact that you are in there, mentoring, women. I love it that you're mentoring women from all over the world. That just sounds fantastic. But, giving them the benefit of your experience and insights and opportunities, that I can't think of a better example of an intentional way to just say, let's keep this moving forward in a positive way. We've made a lot of progress. And I love that stat about panelists. And I guarantee you they got there because they were being intentional, right? They thought consciously about, who do I have on this stage? Is it a diverse group of folks? Are we bringing all different perspectives? And if not, going out and getting it. I mean, we can tackle this, right? This is very doable if we just focus and do so.
And if I might say, gender is a detail, because I'm also on the group that evaluates the applications for the program. And the sheer quality of the applicants is just incredible. Like, it often, happens to me, and the quality of the mentees that I have. Like, oftentimes I tell them, you're qualified to be a mentor, not a mentee. Like, you could be running the session, not applying for it. It's just, there is a lot of talent out there. I think it behooves us to harness that talent, to support people. In a way, the way I like to put it is to give the outsider the inner track, allow people to get a fair shot. And there is so much talent that eventually the cream, rises to the top. So it's just giving people a shot and an opportunity to show what they can do. And again, it's for the benefit of society, but also our industry as well, because we can tap into an enormous source of talent.
That's right. And supporting them along the way. right? Finding ways to support along the way. And that's what we want for all of our own children as they enter the workforce. And that's what we want for all of our colleagues, where we've seen that talent. You just want people to keep helping them and shepherding them along the way. And you're right. It is one of those areas where it is all goodness, right? Where the outcomes are better. It's good for industry. It's good for individual businesses. And it's good for the people involved too.
Super. So, Jodie, I think we're coming towards the end of our podcast. So I wonder if you have any words of wisdom or any thoughts you want to leave us with.
I guess I would say this. We touched on a lot in the conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think what that tells you is that and we just scratched the surface, right? This is an extraordinarily dynamic industry that has so much opportunity in front of it, and we're watching this industry tackling that opportunity. I would really encourage folks who are listening to really be mindful of the fact that one of the things that can get in the way is the wrong public policy environment. A lot of people don't think about it, but it actually matters. And so I encourage people to tell their story or tell me your story, right? Tell us, and we will in turn tell your story. But I am committed every day to supporting this industry and making sure it has room to thrive. And it should, because we are doing incredible work and we have an incredible story to tell.
Thank you very much, Jodie. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in for the MP podcast with Jodie Kelley, CEO of the Electronic Transactions Association.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a real pleasure.